So, what does illicit drug use in America really look like once you get past all the headlines and noise? Well, we're about to find out. We're going to dive right into the raw data from the National Survey on Drug Use and Health. This is a snapshot from back in 2013, and believe me, it paints a really fascinating picture of the story the numbers themselves tell.
Our journey starts with just one number, a really big one, 24.6 million. Just to give you a little perspective on that, that's more than the entire population of Florida at the time.
So who are these 24.6 million people? You might be surprised by just how detailed a picture this data can actually give us.
Okay, so that massive number represents this. In 2013, about 9.4% of all Americans over the age of 12 were considered current users. And what does that mean? It's simple, really. It just means they had used an illicit drug at least once in the 30 days right before they were surveyed.
First up, let's get a feel for the illicit drug landscape as a whole.
All right, Section 2. Let's paint a portrait of the user by looking at the demographics.
When you look at age, wow, the data shows this really dramatic peak. Use is highest among 18 to 20-year-olds, with an incredible 22.6%. That's nearly 1 in 4, reporting they'd used in the past month. And after that peak, you can see a very clear trend. The rate of use just steadily goes down as people get older. The survey also reveals a pretty clear gender gap. In 2013, the rate of current drug use among males was 11.5%, which is significantly higher than the 7.3% reported for females. And when we break it down by race and ethnicity, you can see there's a really wide range. The highest rate of use was reported by people who identified as 2 or more races. That's at 17.4%. And then way down at the other end of the spectrum, Asian Americans reported the lowest rate at just 3.1%. Okay, next up, the most commonly used drugs. So, we know who's using, but what are people actually using?
This chart makes one thing incredibly clear. Marijuana is, by a huge margin, the most commonly used illicit drug. We're talking about nearly 20 million people. The next closest category is the non-medical use of psychotherapeutics, things like pain relievers, at 6.5 million. And after that, you see the numbers just drop off really sharply for substances like cocaine, hallucinogens, and heroin.
So, given how dominant it is in the data, let's take a closer look at marijuana. This slide shows us there's this constant flow of new users. Every single year, for over a decade, about 2.3 million people tried marijuana for the very first time. And if you look at that top line, the data shows the average age of those first-time users consistently hovers right around 17 to 18 years old. 81%. Just take a second and think about that number. What could 81% of the population possibly have in common when it comes to a topic like this? Well, here's the answer. This isn't about current use. This is about lifetime exposure. The 2013 data shows that by the time they turned 50, an incredible 81% of Americans had tried marijuana at least once.
All right, Section 4, drugs, crime, and consequences. Let's zoom out a bit and look at the broader societal impact.
In 1998, this was the number of drug-related deaths recorded in the United States. Just under 17,000. I want you to remember that number. Okay, now let's fast forward just 14 years to 2012. The number of drug-related deaths jumped to nearly 44,000. That is a tragic increase of almost 160% in a pretty short period of time.
Now, when we look at law enforcement, the data shows a very clear focus. Of the nearly 1.6 million arrests for drug abuse violations in 2012, an overwhelming 82% were for simple possession. That's compared to just under 18% for the sale or manufacture of drugs.
In this chart, this shows a really dramatic shift in enforcement priorities over time. Back in 1989, marijuana possession arrests made up about 23% of all drug arrests. But by 2012, that share nearly doubled to over 42%. And this data reveals a really stark reality about the consequences of these arrests. In 2013, African Americans were about 12.6% of the population, but they made up 38% of state inmates for drug charges. What makes this so striking is that, as we saw earlier in the data, the reported rate of drug use was not the highest among all the demographic groups. So when you put it all together, who is using, what they're using, and who's facing the consequences, it really brings up a fundamental question. As all of these trends continue to change and evolve, what should the future of drug policy in America actually look like?